In this episode of the podcast, we're talking to one of my close friends, Marlies Hartmann. Now, Marlies, I would describe her as an optimist to her core. She's just a fun, loving person who's a ball to be around. But I wanted Marlies on the podcast because of her experiences. And yes, we're going to talk about her game show experiences, which includes some amazing winnings from The Price of Right. But that's actually not what I'm talking about. Later into adulthood, Marlies decided to become a photographer in a field where, honestly, she had no experience in. Not only did she become a photographer, she became an incredible one. She has carved a name out for herself in the past few years of joining the industry and has created a sustainable business that takes care of herself as well as her daughter. She's an amazing person, and that's nothing to say about the images that she's creating, because the images are out of this world. You guys have to check out her work, but let's go ahead in the meanwhile and dive into the episode. This is the TSS Podcast. It's a place for authentic conversations to uncover the stupid, simple truths that help us succeed in business, create better relationships, and lead more fulfilling lives. Welcome to Think Stupid Simple. Okay, my friend, we begin every episode. I don't even know what to go under or over right now, but we light candles. This puts us in the creative brain space, in case you didn't know. It's the meeting of the minds. Oh, that's smoky right now. Do you know why it's smoky?
Because you didn't clip the tip of the wick.
You are the first of 40 guests that knows that answer.
Yeah. I love candles. Into candles, yeah.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Remember, that's why they nicknamed me Game Show. Useless knowledge that other people don't know. But, ask me what I had for lunch yesterday. I won't remember.
Well, there's tons of fun things that we have to talk about in this episode. We kind of brainstormed before just a minute ago that it'd be fun to talk about wedding stories and experiences that have kind of like shaped us throughout the years. And I think that'd be a really cool topic. But I do need to make note that you've been on several game shows.
Yes. Well, I've been on 3, but only 2 of them I was actually on air.
Okay.
So the first game show I ever did, I made it you have to compete to even get on the show.
Yeah.
And I made it on the show, and you have a celebrity partner who's your teammate. And I can't even remember the name of my celebrity partner, but she's a country singer. I think her first name's Sarah. And she had been on Dancing with the Stars. And long story short, we did not work well together.
Oh, no.
And we were out the very first round. And so they didn't even air.
Why didn't you work well together? I got to know this.
Well, the first thing that I didn't know is that she had some sort of scandalous affair on Dancing with the Stars. I found this out later. Oh. And so she had this giant engagement ring. And so I said something to the effect of oh, are you engaged? When are you getting married? And she kind of gave me this weird look, because I think she thought that I was taking a dig at the scandal, because I think she was engaged to the new guy that she had the affair with on Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah.
And I think that she thought I was somehow kind of digging at her.
In the know, and you're going after
And I
her.
didn't. I was genuinely just wow, you got an ice skating rink on your finger. That's, worth mentioning. And after that moment, it felt a little bit off. And it was, it's the kind of game show where I think it was a pyramid type game show. So I could give clues where the word I needed her to guess was labyrinth. Uh-huh. And so I said maze, and her response was corn. And so we just didn't mesh well.
She went the Hispanic route with that.
Something like that. But so that was the first. But it was actually good that didn't work out, because I wouldn't have qualified to be on the second game show I was on, which was Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
That's right. Okay.
And that was 2009. And that was the one that, was the big money winner for me, because I made it to the $500,000 question.
Dang.
And decided to leave. I didn't know the answer. It was a history question.
Yeah.
Do you want to see if you know the answer?
Okay, ask me the question.
Okay, so who was the president of the Confederate Army during the American Civil War?
That's a really difficult
We'll see
question.
if Anthony knows this too, if you want.
He has the Google machine.
Oh,
available.
yeah, no, he doesn't get to look it up.
The president during the...
Of the Confederate Army during the American Civil War. That was the question. That was the $500,000 question.
Fifth graders know this?
Apparently also, I have a lot of family in the South, and a lot of them knew this answer because there's either statues or schools are named after him or roads kind of thing. I mean, I'll never forget the answer.
I don't know.
I would not have guessed that this is who it is. Wow.
Do you want to even just stab at a guess? No. Okay.
Anything that I say is going to reveal how dumb I am to the degree. So I'd rather just not say it.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
that makes sense.
I'm going to plead the fifth.
You'd rather say nothing
I plead the fifth.
So the answer is Jefferson Davis.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Which I had no clue. None of the fifth graders even knew.
Oh.
So if I had even tried to use one of my like phone a friend saves and used a fifth grader, it wouldn't have helped.
You have to use a fifth grader with one of the...
No, you don't
okay.
have to, but you get 3 like phone a friends kind of thing where you can use these different strategies where they help you. And I just decided at that point to leave with the $300,000. So,
So you left with $300,000.
So I left with $300,000 and pretty much just like peed my pants the rest of that day. And then we couldn't tell anyone about it because you don't get the money unless if the episode airs. And
wait, the episode has to air for you to get the money?
Right, because think about it, it's advertising dollars, right? So I they made my episode the second to last of the season. So I waited and watched, and you're just hoping you'll get a phone call and they're going to let you know like, hey, your episode's airing next week. We're going to cut you a check.
Wow.
And so I spent a good part of that year. I got pregnant with my daughter that month. I was like, hey, you won. What are you going to do next? I'm going to get knocked up. I'm making a baby. So I got pregnant with my daughter that month. And then she was born before it had even aired.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. So it was over 9 months later.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but game show winnings are taxed at like 50%.
Oh my goodness. Yes. So, and I actually was offered I could take $60,000 a year for 5 years. So that was one option.
That's nice.
Or I could take a lump sum, which was, I think, $269,000.
Lame.
Yep. So,
so the only way for you to get the 300,000 is if you actually
did it over 5 years.
Over 5 years.
Which for me, when I was thinking about investing, and also because, I mean, this is after 2008, where we were like, I don't know, is Fox even going to be around in 5 years? We don't know. So we thought it was the safer choice to take the lump sum, and then you end up paying. I mean, I probably paid over $100,000 of that in taxes.
Yeah,
but I mean, if you think about any income, you're going to be paying tax on it. Even if I had taken, I like to look at it as if I had taken $60,000 a year and I was working in a job that was paying me $60,000 a year, I'd still be paying taxes on that every year.
For sure.
Except now I then took the luxury of just being home with my daughter for the first, 5 years that she was home. And so that was sort of how I saw it was, okay, I can have this family that I can start and not worry about investing in her for that time. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were recently on The Price is Right too, right?
Yeah. And so
what the hell is up with you? And like, how do you get on these game shows, man?
So the first game show, I had just moved here. Had I just moved here? We had lived here, I think, like maybe 7 months, and there was a writer strike going on. So I moved here because I come from a theater background, and I had done this really terrible independent film in California, and everyone was like, "You need to do film." So. And all these other stars aligned. So we ended up moving out here. I was married at the time. And there was a writer's strike, so there was nothing going on. There weren't even like auditions happening. And so my now ex-husband was like, you need to, find another way to contribute financially if you're not working right now. And so I thought that I was applying to be in the audience because these game shows would pay $100. You come for 4 hours and your paid audience member, right? They tell you to like dress nice, and then they put you like behind the contestants directly so that they can kind of curate who is directly behind the contestants on camera. And I thought that's what I was applying for. And they contacted me and said, to be completely honest, they said, we need some eye candy on the show. We need you to come, dress bombshell. This is literally, I'm not even kidding. This is what they said. We need you to come in. We're going to do an on-camera interview. You have to do an IQ test, and you have to do an on-camera test, basically,
Wow.
like quiz test.
Okay.
And so I went in. This was like on a Wednesday.
I wonder if they would approach the conversation that same way today.
Absolutely not. No, I mean, this is 2008, right? So so I went in, I did the IQ test, which was super stressful, and then did the on-camera interview, and then did the on-camera test. And they said, okay, well, we'll let you know we're filming tomorrow.
That's
And
crazy.
I went home, had dinner, and then got a call, and they said, you need to be here at 8 a.m. tomorrow. So that was 2008, and then that aired in 2009, and then summer of 2019, so not too long ago, when TV was still happening and things were still shooting, which is finally, luckily, getting back to where it should be.
Yeah.
I got tickets to The Price is Right. And that was, a totally different experience, because you go in and everybody wants to be called onto contestants row, but not everybody has the opportunity, right? And they one at a time will go down. They literally they do a 5-second interview of every single person in the audience for every taping.
Interesting. Okay.
And there's this guy.
A 5-second interview?
I mean, it's literally, if I were the guy. Hi, what's your name?
Pi.
Where are you from, Pi?
Orange County.
Oh, and what do you do?
I'm a photographer.
Oh, that's amazing. Do you like photography?
Sure.
Okay, great. Next person, right? So that's it. And you have that is your chance to interview to be a contestant.
What could you possibly say in that 5 minutes?
So here's, yes. In
10 seconds.
Exactly. So, you have a name tag on, so they can already even see your name. So he wouldn't have even said, what's your name? He'd be like, hey, Pi, how are you? Right? So I knew they were going to butcher my name when they were coming down the line. And I'm like, okay, they're going to ask, what's your name? This is so cheesy. This story is so cheesy. I can't believe I'm even telling you this. So they get to me, and the guy's like, is it Marlies? And I said, no, it's Marlies, rhymes with car lease, but I don't want to lease a car. I want to win one, right? As cheesy and obnoxious, like, I don't even know where that came from. But I knew that I wanted to be a big personality.
This is how you stand out to get called up.
Right. And you just see this guy like standing in the background with a clipboard, and he's like, jotting down notes, and right.
Bring this one.
And then he's like, have you ever watched the show? I said, I used to stay home sick just so I could watch Price is Right as a kid. Right. And then my mom was the next person to be interviewed. So of course she's like, I can validate that she did do this. So and it was my birthday week. They like having people that are newlyweds, or it's their birthday, or, that sort of thing. And so they had called down the original contestants, and I was still in the audience. They called down another person, and then I think one other person might have gotten called. I can't remember how many people at that point, but then you can't even hear your name being called. They have to hold up a big billboard with your name because the audience is so loud.
Oh, crazy.
And they held up my name, and I started jumping up and down, and I literally piddled. Like, I was like a puppy that was super excited.
Piddled? What does that mean?
Like, peed a little bit. Like, my mom and I, there's video footage. I mean, if you watch it back, it's so embarrassing, but you can see we're jumping up and down. So, and I'm sure like there's bathrooms, but like you're being treated like cattle all day. Right. Yeah. And you're waiting in rooms, and they want your energy high. And I was so, I can't believe I'm telling you this either. I piddled just a little bit, just a titch, because I was so excited that I was being called down.
Well, I watched it.
That's right.
Yeah, I watched it.
That's so
But
funny.
now I'm going to go back and watch it again.
Well, no, you won't be able to. It's nothing like that. It was just out of pure excitement. And like, I really was in shock, because they also are very specific about the demographic of contestants that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And they had already called down a girl who is blonde and looked about my age. And so I thought, okay, they've already sort of filled that demographic. And so I was convinced at that point that I wasn't going to get on the show. So when they did call my name, I was very excited. And then instantly, so I went from being in the audience to being in the contestants row to guessing. My first guess, I was off by $4.
Wow.
So it was an air hockey table that was $7.99, I think was the price, and I guess $7.95.
Dang.
And it was just a total, I mean, that's where
Luck came in.
luck came in completely. And I mean, luck with judgment, right?
Uh-huh.
And then I made it on stage, and then I was the first person of the day to win on stage, to actually win my game, which they gave me like the easiest game because the first two people lost. And so they're like, bring in the easy game. Somebody's got to win on today's show. And
Didn't you get a Winnebago or something?
yeah, so because I was the first person to win, I got this like season premiere week bonus prize.
Okay.
And I'm standing on stage next to like the beautiful models, and they open the doors, you know, on the next stage, because there's different like stages.
Yeah.
And so they're like, because you won, and I knew I was going to get whatever this bonus prize was. They're like, you've won a brand new luxury. And what do you think they're going to say? Car.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and they go, travel trailer. And you're just, yay. And in my head, I'm like, okay, what's this worth? What's this worth? Like, what can I sell this for?
Yeah.
You know,
You're not going to park it in LA.
well, you need a truck to tow it, right? And so it instantly was just like a liability, because you're paying for a place to store it, and I don't have a truck. Like, I mean, I don't have a driveway. I live in a townhouse near the beach. So, but I mean, nevertheless, it was still very exciting to win this like tiny home on wheels that I sold, you know. And
How much did you sell it for?
How much did I sell it for? Oh my gosh, it's so sad. You're gonna when you hear, you're gonna be like, wow. So I sold it for, it was, the MSRP was $33,000. And then when I reached out to some dealerships to be like, I'm a buyer and this is what I want, let's see what you would sell it to me for, they were saying $24,000.
Oh.
And when I asked the dealer as the winner, hey, would you like to just buy it as, you know, it's brand new, do you guys want to just take it off my hands? They offered me $15,000, which I was like, oh dang, that's, you know,
That's not great.
no. So I said, and I have to pay taxes on it.
Do you pay taxes on the MSRP, or do you pay taxes?
You pay taxes on the MSRP to take on the vehicle, right? So whatever the taxes are for that, and then you have to pay income tax on top of that. On top of that. So I ended up selling it for $21,000 to just a couple. I put it on a Facebook group and said, you know, there's literally 0 miles on this thing. If anybody's interested, like, here's the listing price. Here's what I'm selling it for. And I think I listed it at 22. They said 20. We agreed at 21.
Yeah.
So
you could potentially end up owing more on it than you actually get for it.
There's this whole concept of people who, not even concept of people. There was a contestant on The Price is Right who was given a lot of flack because at one point he had an opportunity to win a car or take like $10,000 cash.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was even like $5,000. I don't remember, but it seemed far less than the value of the car.
Yeah.
And he ended up choosing the cash, and everybody in the audience was like, oh my goodness. But the blog post that I read about it went on to explain sort of why he made that decision, and how in the end, it was actually, you understood why he did things the way that he did them.
For sure. Because if you're not only, you have to pay that tax on the value, the MSRP value of the car, whatever they list it as. Then if they list it at that point, you also pay income tax on that as a capital gain, which is up to 50%.
Yep.
So that means that, you know, if it's a $30,000 car, you can essentially owe $16,000.
Right.
And if you sell it for 20,
yep,
it's $4,000.
So between that and the other items that I won, because I won all these like smaller, like a 3D printer and the air hockey table and a computer and this deluxe barbecue that's still sitting in the box in my garage. Literally, like, I have this $3,000 barbecue that's charcoal that I will probably, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. And at the end of the day, we figured out that I probably will profit about $15,000.
Okay. That's still pretty awesome for,
It's not a bad day.
yeah,
Like
it's not bad at all.
it's great. I mean, it's still super fun, and it makes for a great story to talk about. I mean, how many people although it seems like in LA, everybody knows somebody that's been on The Price is Right.
I mean, you're the only one that I know that, yeah, you're the only one that I know.
Yeah. But see, now you're in the club. Like
But I'm in the
everybody
club.
knows somebody.
Yes, I am in the club. That's amazing. Okay, so this was fun story time in your game show experiences. So let's rewind this a second. You mentioned that after winning that first game show, you mentioned that your previous husband, that was around the time that you became a wedding photographer, was it not? Can you tell me about this transition, like that story?
So 2014 is January of 2014 is when we separated. And I had not been working. So I had been home with my daughter, and she was still in preschool. She was 4 at the time.
Okay.
And so when we split, part of the divorce was he had me go do this. It was not an income evaluation. I can't remember what it was called, but basically they had to like impute an income on me, because that would then change child support
Alimony
and all
and
that
child
stuff.
support, yeah.
And so I went and did this test, and I remember going, and he must have paid, gosh, he probably paid so much money for it at the time, because, you know, when you're going through a divorce, lawyers just love sucking every,
It's horrible.
penny they can. And I'm sure they get commissions for all those things. So I went to the guy's office, and you walk in and there's all these scuba photos, this underwater photography all over. And at the time I had just started doing some photography and building a social media platform. And I was trying to figure out, I was in like the food blogging world, which is a whole other life. And I was getting certified through the Institute for the Psychology of Eating. So I was becoming an eating psychology coach. And I was doing some,
I'm going to ask about what that is in a minute, but
Right.
keep going.
A whole separate, like, this is why, like, why is she a wedding photographer? So that was sort of my plan. And I was doing some photography sort of in conjunction, but it was mostly iPhone photography. And I can't even remember at this point I think I had just started shooting on a DSLR, like for the first time ever. So this must have been by 2015. I mean, my divorce lasted 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So this must have been in 2015. And when he was sort of asking, because they want to figure out what your potential jobs could be, and I sort of mentioned photography, he was like, photography is not a job, it's a hobby.
The lawyer.
No,
or
this
whoever
is
this evaluator
this is the evaluator, right? Who's got all the underwater photography that
tool.
he had taken as a hobby, right? So he was a hobby photographer who worked as this evaluator. And I remember thinking, gosh, it's nothing, there's nothing more motivating than someone telling you that you can't do something, right? And it was the same thing. I mean, he ended up, the report came back that I should, work at the front desk of a gym or a daycare.
You're joking.
Yeah. So those were his suggestions as far as what my career path should be.
I mean, I don't curse much, but that guy's fucking dumb. Like, seriously.
I mean, and I'm a 4-year graduate degree. Like, I went to New York University. I've never really had like a 9-to-5 job at a startup, but like, I would like to think that I could have found employment beyond the front desk of a gym, right?
But I mean, what he said is so, it showcases his own sexism, like straight to the T. Like, you're going to be a front desk person at a gym? So basically he's just looking at your face.
Maybe. Or, I mean, I don't know. But I will tell you this, that
But that's kind of good for you, by the way. In a divorce where you're going through that, you should for sure be like, that's all I can do for sure.
That's the extent of my abilities.
Yeah,
is to say hi and welcome.
The lower your
Scan your
income
badge.
remains, I mean,
Right.
just for anybody that wants to know, the lower your income remains, the more the other person
Which
has to make up
the
for it.
irony, though, Pi, is I gave up spousal support like as part of our settlement, so it really had no bearing anyway.
You gave it up. Why?
Well, after 2.5 years of going, I mean, we weren't married for over 10 years, so it wasn't going to be long term, right? So, and after 2.5 years of battling with someone, you get to a point where you just want it to be over, right?
Yeah.
You just want it to be
You just
done.
want to move on, for sure.
And so we finally did mediation. I mean, and we dealt with a custody battle, and that's a whole other story. But we did mediation, and we were not getting there. We were about to have to call it, and he was with his lawyers in one room, and I was with my lawyers, and then they go back and forth from room to room, and charge you all this money, plus you're paying for this like retired judge to tell you what would happen if you do go to court. And side note, we started a business here together. It was a real estate business. So finally, as the lawyers are like, we're gonna have to go home and schedule another day. I said, can we just get him in the room? Can I just talk to him? And we got in a room, and the two of us talked for about 10 minutes, and we were able to come to an agreement, just the two of us. And part of that was him sort of reassuring me that our daughter would be taken care of. And it was me having to make some of those sacrifices that would make him feel like he won. Now, this being said, like we get along very well. I always tell people we're very happily unmarried. And I almost think that by putting him in a place where he felt like he won, he has been more generous and more compassionate and more empathetic than if I had kept digging my heels in. And there's something to be said about letting go and sort of swallowing your pride, almost to say, and letting taking your ego out of it. That's how I would say it. There's something about taking your ego out of it and just letting the contention be over, and sort of taking that release off of the pressures. I mean, it's such a contentious, divorce is one of the worst things that I'd say 99% of divorces are very, very difficult and exhausting and expensive and emotionally scarring.
Yeah. I don't know of a worse thing than divorce. I mean, having gone through it myself.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything that would be close to that.
Right. So I think in getting us to a place where we could start to heal was the best decision I could make. We could both make, because I'll say we made that decision together. And so then it also put me in a place of, okay, if I'm not getting a check every month, right, I have to support myself and my daughter.
Yeah.
Right. And having that fire also highly, highly motivated me to start a business and sort of put the power into my own hands. And I really want to find this guy and just be like, just, photography isn't just a hobby. There are people
You need to find this guy.
Right?
And be like, I'm one of the best in the industry now. And,
you're being overly generous, but
I
thank
have you to thank for that. So
you. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's almost like I'm going to do this just to stick it to you.
I mean, sometimes that is like there's plenty of different sources of motivation, and I don't think any of it's necessarily wrong. I think oftentimes I have come from that place of like, I'm going to show you, and then later done it for myself. But it's been like that initial motivation that's like, dude, no, I am going to prove you wrong. And
do you ever watch Shark Tank?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Barbara Corcoran,
I haven't seen.
she's one of the sharks on Shark Tank. And
One of the sharks.
I was actually listening to her on Clubhouse, probably, 4 weeks ago. And she mentioned that it was her greatest enemies that became her greatest motivators, right? Or like her greatest adversaries, the ones who were telling her like, oh, you can't do that or you'll never succeed.
For sure.
And then, she owns Corcoran Real Estate, Corcoran. it's one of the biggest realty companies, and she's gone on to do, you know, all these other things. But the fact that she would be in a room with a bunch of men and they'd all be like laughing at her, you know, and it's sometimes as damaging and as difficult as those experiences can be. I personally, and maybe it was, you know, we could dig into our childhood as to why, but I personally turn those experiences into opportunities. And, I think it's coming from a place of privilege to be able to say that, right? That I was able to sort of take this guy telling me that photography was a hobby and be like, okay, well, I'm now going to prove him wrong. And in the bowels of my divorce, and when one of the lowest places, my ex told me, you know, you're never going to be able to see our daughter because you're going to be working all the time. You're going to have to, you know, wait tables, and you're not going to see her. And that was one of my biggest fears, was that I would be working a job with hours that would not allow me to spend time with her. And people who know me and know London, my daughter, like we've been BFFs since birth. Like she came out and I was like, oh my gosh, if I created a laundry list of like who I would want my child to be, like it just so happens. And I always say if I had 10 kids, she would be my favorite. Right. And I just got lucky that I just have her. But so he really hit that as one of my fear points, which was I'm not going to get to see her every day. And so when people ask me, why did you become a wedding photographer? I always say it's because it was the way that I could see myself making the most money with my camera and also be able to pick her up from school every day.
Yeah.
And that was really my initial motivator as to why I became a wedding photographer.
I can relate to that. I mean, that was one of the reasons at the time. It was more so for us, it was having Monday through Friday time to work on other ventures and projects and being able to provide an income over the weekends, basically. And we thought the same exact thing. Like when we have our families, you know, it's more control of our schedule. It's a really good part of the business.
Yeah. Although what you don't realize is that by controlling your schedule, you're then working all the time.
Yes. Well, I think that's any entrepreneur. I feel like you're working all the time. Like you never turn it off. I'll oftentimes, I'll be doing random things. It might be cooking, it might be showering, it might be whatever. But Yen will walk by and be like, what are you thinking about? She'll look at me and just be like, I know you're thinking about something. And I'll say, oh, I'm just thinking about, you know, what I have to do, you know, tomorrow. And like it's always on your mind. It never leaves. The only way that I feel like you can get that is with a 9-to-5 job where you literally clock in, you clock out.
Oh, yeah.
And
my mom is
a
flight attendant, and when she's working, she's working. And when she's not working, that's it. Yeah. She can be doing whatever she wants. And there's, you know, of course, I'm envious sometimes of people with those kinds of jobs. Same thing with my brother. He works for eBay, you know, and when he's working, he's working. And when he's not, he can be doing whatever. And it's hard to explain to those people, you know, I'll see family over the holidays or whatnot. And I'm responding to emails sometimes in the evenings and I'm bad at making, one of my goals this year is to be working on boundaries of when I'm working and when I'm not. But it's hard because you're like, well, what if I forget? And it's just a quick response. Let me just get it done. But it's those little things that sort of eat away at your headspace and your eye contact, right?
For sure.
That affect others around you, for sure. So that is something I'm hoping to get better at.
Well, Anthony, this is a great time in talking about that guy that said Marlies couldn't make a career of photography. It's a great time to throw up some of her work and actually show it. It would be really fun to go and find this guy and be like, what were you talking about?
Oh, this is hilarious. You're so funny.
I mean, it blows my mind. Wait, that's what's his name?
Uncle Jesse.
Uncle Jesse. You photographed their wedding?
Yeah.
That's
John
rad.
Stamos' wedding.
Stamos.
Yeah.
That's
Although
so cool.
I can only share what they've shared. And as you know, from being in the wedding industry, your couples never share the photos that you would want to share, right?
True.
So.
And I've done a couple celebrity ones where they pick like the weirdest photos.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Like,
yeah. They have.
And that's what the magazines want too. They're like, we want these ones.
Well, they ended up not. They had a huge robbery of all of her jewelry that was on loan, I think, from Neil Lane
During the wedding?
the night before. So they had FBI agents and they were dealing with all this stuff. So they ended up not selling any of the photos to any of publications. So it was even more limited as to what I was able to share. Just
That's
what they've
wild.
shared, on social media and such. But
Well, I feel like this is so important to post. And Anthony, this is the perfect snippet right here. I mean, from the guy telling you that you cannot make a career of photography to you saying, watch me, and going down this path, the entire photography industry is grateful for the addition that you have made to it. I mean, look at this incredible work. This is another case of where, had you listened to what this person said, how many of these people and the industry, the photographers around you, wouldn't be inspired because of the work that you've created?
well, thank you for that.
So good on you, my friend.
Thanks.
So did you feel like, I'll be honest, when I was going through my own divorce, it was a rough process. And it very much kind of affected, at least for a period of time, the way that I looked at weddings. You were going through this for 2.5 years and you were transitioning into it. Did your own experience kind of affect that, or did you enjoy it all the same?
I've found it very healing in a couple of ways. I mean, I think for me to be able to see other people's love stories.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that I love to ask couples when I'm meeting with them is, if there's 7 billion people in the world, like why this person, right?
Mhm.
Why pi? Why yin? And I love hearing those answers. And oftentimes I'll hear a lot of answers that are very different than the marriage that I was in.
Mhm.
And so I think I have this really great stockpile for if I ever do get married again, that okay, this is what it should feel like.
Mhm.
And also it has been incredibly healing to see the dysfunction at
Yeah.
weddings and sort of heal that dysfunctional family that I had. I mean, I grew up with 4 siblings, 5 siblings. 4 of them were basically living in the house while I'm the second to youngest, but, and I lived in Utah also,
Mhm.
where having big families is not a big deal, but we were not from Utah. We were not Mormon, and we don't ski, or I don't ski. So
So pretty much there's no reason to be there.
I'm useless in Utah. I joke that they kicked me out, but, we had such a dysfunctional family, and it was just pure chaos growing up. And my dad, three of my siblings were from my dad's first marriage.
Yeah.
And so we had this crazy blended family where like trying to go on family vacations was just blowout fights and crying and, all the dysfunction that you can imagine that
Yeah.
as a kid, you think this is just normal. And then you grow up and you're like, oh no, my family was crazy. And then you shoot weddings and you're like, no, my family's normal, right? So it's sort of this like arc of roller coaster thing being like, great. Like, I've shot the wedding where one of the sisters only wanted to be photographed on one side. And you laugh, but then you find out it's because she was in a car accident and had a scar on one side of her
Now I feel
face,
bad
right? I know. And same thing that you're like, your sister wants what? And then you're like, oh, okay. And then it just so happens you're trying to get, 20 people into one photo in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And she happens to be on the wrong side. And the bride's like, just deal with it. It's just one photo. And then she's like, F you. And, storming off. And you're like, and the bride's like, I'm so sorry. And you're like, I have dealt with so much worse in my own family. Right. So there's definitely that healing element of, seeing these life events that are high stress, right?
Yeah.
And then watching your couples move on to have kids and to see these healthy relationships that people have, and to shoot second marriages, which is also really healing to see and to witness and to photograph. So,
Do you know you laid out the entire premise for the book that I wrote?
amazing.
So I a while back, and I think that's one of the things that drew me into wedding photography as well, was having this broken thing at home and really growing up seeing dysfunctional relationships, weddings were appealing because not with every client, but with quite a few, you get to experience like healthy love and what that looks like and what that is. So I started writing it down. Every time I would go out on these shoots, I would start coming back and just documenting notes of like, you know, how did they, it wasn't like personal details. It was like, how did they speak to each other? What was going on? What were they saying to friends? What were they saying to family? Like, how were the interactions between them? And I would start documenting characteristics. And it wasn't until about 6 or 7 years later, I had been going through counseling for 15 years, read every single book. My counselor literally said, I was like, you've told me so much and I still don't know how to fix it. I go, I don't even know what a healthy relationship looks like. Can you just spell that out for me? And this counselor says, I don't know how to help you. You've read every book on my shelf. I don't know that I have the answers that you're looking for. And I was like, okay. And he's like, let me do some research and I'll call you. And long story short, he never called.
Oh gosh.
So I left, and on driving home, I was sitting there.
He
thinking,
retired after that. He's like, I can't help him.
Yeah, I'm sure he was just like, there's no help. But in leaving that session, I was like, why am I asking these people? Like, the professionals can't even answer my question. I've met with so many of them. I have enough data. I have enough information. I've read enough books. I'm going to write my own manual for what a healthy relationship looks like. Just so simply my children can understand, and hopefully other people can go into life knowing not just what a marriage, but a friendship and a business partnership and a, you know, any type of long-term relationship, whether it's family or marriage or anything in between. This is what a healthy one looks like. These are the ways to understand how to fix what's going wrong.
Right.
But that was the entire premise. And it's what fed me for a very long time, was just collecting data. It was like, every one of my clients became case studies.
Right. Not knowing, unknowingly.
Yeah. So now the book is composed of 500 plus case studies that, all the data comes from about 500 plus case studies. But obviously all
People
the
don't
personal
realize
information's gone.
how, with weddings, I mean, you get really into your couple's world. I mean,
For sure.
you are invited in on their most intimate day, right? I mean, and aside from, I would imagine, the birth of their children.
Yeah.
Right. And so being in that space, I mean, you see relationships in a way that you wouldn't necessarily see from your friends that you meet out for dinner. Right?
100%.
Yeah.
Or what a counselor sees, because as a photographer, you know, you build that relationship of trust from the beginning. And if you've done your job right, which you always do, but if a photographer does their job right, then when they go into a shoot, the clients aren't thinking about how they're acting. They're just behaving naturally.
Right.
But if two people walk into a counselor's office, they're not going to present an authentic version of themselves. They're going to present what they're comfortable presenting. And if two people walk into, you know, a couple's date, they're once again going to be on their kind of certain behavior, their best behavior. But as a photographer, you're spending so much time that you see authenticity. And they feel comfortable. You're carrying a camera. It's not a clipboard. You know, you're not taking notes on, well, they didn't know I was taking notes, but I was
Mental notes.
Mental notes.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, with my daughter and with my divorce, and I'm trying to reframe, because I haven't been calling us a family, which is so silly, because she and I are a family. We finally got family photos last month done because I was like, oh, I forgot we are a family. I knew, after growing up sort of in this dysfunctional home that was so filled with really dirty arguing, you know, fighting and a mental abuse, and, you know, sometimes physical abuse, and then falling into a marriage where you're like, oh my gosh, I married my father, right?
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I married a man 14 years older than me.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and to the point where he had me convinced that I needed to seek help, and I went to a psychiatrist who, you know, said, because he was telling me, oh, you know, my ex was like, you're becoming your father, you're your father, and I went to this really expensive doctor who said, you're not becoming your father, you married your father, right? Which is a very common pattern, especially because I met my ex so young, and we got involved when I was 22. And he was 14 years older, right? So we're looking at 22 versus 36.
That's
And
a wild difference in
it's
age.
It is, I don't want to stereotype it, because there are couples who have vast age differences that can make it work, but we both fell into a role that was not healthy, right? So we
Yeah.
were already setting ourselves up for an unhealthy relationship. But the point that I'm trying to get at is that I knew when I was finally strong enough to leave my marriage that I was promising my child, my daughter, a peaceful home.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if nothing else, like, that is what you are going to grow up in, a peaceful home. You are going to have that thing that I didn't have, right? And I didn't want her. And it's funny how sometimes it takes our children to say, I don't want you growing up in a home that was similar to what I grew up in, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want you to hear that, the fighting or the name calling or those sorts of things. And so instead of even doing it for yourself, you're doing it for that person or those little people.
Yeah.
So
That was a huge motivating factor for myself as well. Was I saw myself repeating the same cycle that my dad did, as well as his father, and I was like, I was looking at my children, Ethan and Ellie, and I kept thinking, how am I going to possibly teach them what a relationship looks like when I'm demonstrating this every single day, this dysfunctional thing? It came down to my friend asking, like, if one of your children was in, because I stayed in for 15 years, or at least I didn't leave for 15 years due to several reasons. One, religious beliefs, thinking that,
Yeah.
God put us into this. And it's like, come on, like, what kind of, we're all, there's nothing wrong with religion, but people that are highly religious I find that they have a hard time understanding that there is a gray. They're very much black and white. And if God has put something together, then, boy, who are you to, like, stop it? You know what I mean? Like, who are you to step in the way? And the correct reality is that, no, like, I chose this, and I made it a series of bad decisions based on bad information and experiences. But it took me 15 years to unwind that, to get over the guilt, to be strong enough that I could deal with the social repercussions, everything. It took 15 years to get to that place, and ultimately it led down to one question that my friend asked, and he said, like, you're so hard on yourself. You're staying in this thing. But he goes, if one of your children was in this marriage, what would you do? What would you say to them? Mm-hmm. And without even thinking, I just said, run. And he's like, what? And I go, run. I would tell Ethan and Ellie to run. Like, this is not what you should be doing, and this is not what you should be. And he goes, why?
You should spend your life, right?
Why do you love your children enough to say that, but you're not willing to do it for yourself? And so it comes down to those moments where you're like, for you in London, like, I'm going to show her a peaceful home. And for me, it was, I want to give you guys a good example, and I don't want you to repeat the same mistake. That being said, once you go through it, oh man, like, the costs are insane. The cost of divorce, not just financial,
yeah.
but emotional. It's gnarly.
Yeah. But
So,
I've never seen anyone who's come out on the other side not for the better. Let me say
True.
that again. I've never seen anyone come out of a divorce not happy that they did.
well, like, I see, I've seen other, like, my ex isn't necessarily doing better than she was, because her identity was built up around, who she was married to and who she was, like, as a wife. So I don't necessarily feel like I feel like the kids, myself, and everybody else has
come out better
come
on
out
the other
in
side.
a better, healthier place. But I don't know that she has. So I feel like oftentimes there's one person that is, they themselves are kind of lost in trying to figure things out. And I think for that person, the other person was the stabilizing force. And when that person exits, then they're kind of left to their own, devices and whatnot. But yeah, I do know a lot of cases too where both people come out healthier.
Yeah.
So that does for sure. And
then maybe the way of saying it is the person who wants the divorce always ends up better on the other side. Maybe.
I mean, there's so many different, types of cases and things. What I found was always crazy about the process was the law in it, because the law tries to take a middle line stance, but it's possibly the most biased thing I've ever seen. I mean, the way that it works in terms of like as a business owner versus as somebody that just has a job versus the that self-impugned kind of amount that you're supposed to be making, that was never really used in my case. Anyway, there's a lot of like just details that I feel like the law doesn't step into any of the nuance. It just says this is what it is. It doesn't matter what you did. It doesn't matter what you did, at least in California, this is the case. And in a lot of situations, it's like completely unjustified. So that said, let's talk about some wedding stories.
Oh, goodness.
I know you got some good wedding stories.
I think every wedding photographer has at least one good wedding story.
Oh, there's so many.
I think you should start.
No, I've been talking too much. Let's hear of the brief little amount that you told me of this Mexico trip with the other photographer that was hired to come in.
Yeah, that was a good life lesson. So 2 months ago, January, during the pandemic, right? I was booked last minute. A couple reached out and their UK photographer couldn't make it to Mexico. They were getting married in Guadalajara. So maybe like 3 weeks before the wedding, I was hired. And flew down there with an assistant who spoke Spanish because I don't speak any Spanish. And the day of the wedding, I'm the only photographer. And so, as you know, when you're the only photographer, you're trying to get bride prep, groom prep, ceremony details, all the things all day. Just, it's all on you. And while I'm shooting family portraits prior to the ceremony, I see that there's another photographer and videographer shooting around the ceremony area. And so I send my assistant to go ask why there's another photographer, videographer, because it's also in my contract that I am the sole photographer of the event. And he comes back and says, I spoke to the planner and they're only going to be here for 1 hour. They're just shooting details that will just be for the planner. And so I didn't like it, but I just said, okay. And I didn't really notice them after that because I was so wrapped up in just making sure I got everything that I needed. And then next thing you know, the ceremony's about to start. I'm standing at the top of the aisle waiting for the bride to come so I can shoot, her walking and then, grab a shot of the groom's reaction. And I see the other photographer standing at the end of the aisle and he's shooting. And at that moment, you can't really do anything. You just have to keep shooting and working. And as soon as an opportunity came up, I mean, we were in like, it's called a loggia. I don't know what you call it in these haciendas. It's like basically the patio area. So it's a very narrow area with like the columns and it's open air on one side. And then the other side is like the hacienda with the courtyard in the middle. Yeah.
There's only so many spaces you can stand basically.
Yes. It's very cramped. Right. Yeah. And even though they only had, 20 guests, maybe 15 guests, it was a very small wedding. The videographer was literally like in the only place where I could be standing. And then the photographer was in my shots. Right. So I did kind of that like cut sign to the photographer at one point during the ceremony to be like, you are supposed to be done like an hour ago. And he puts the camera down and kind of sheepishly like, walks away. And then I realize he's standing on the grass and he's shooting from the grass.
Oh man.
The ceremony. And I'm looking at him thinking, okay, I'm what can I do? And then later in the ceremony, this was like an hour and a half religious ceremony. It was not a South Asian wedding. They were Bethel, the Church of Bethel, which is in Northern California. They have a lot of like music playing and all this stuff. So, an hour into this hour and a half long ceremony, he's back shooting the ceremony again in the ceremony area. And I go to my assistant and I'm like, if he doesn't like, you got to tell him to stop, or this makes me sound like a horrible, violent person, but I was very hungry and it was very hot. And I said, if he doesn't stop shooting, I'm going to go over there and throw punch the guy. And he's like, I gotcha. I'll take care of it. Which like, you know me, like, I'm like Susie Sunshine. And if I actually had gone over to him, I would have been like, please, can you stop?
Yeah,
like, you know, that was,
we all say those things when we're,
I acted really tough, but you know, but my assistant understood like how serious I was, because I was like, this guy needs to stop shooting. Like, this is not okay in so many levels. And at that point he stopped. And the explanation was, again, that he was just there to get details, and he went over to go shoot the reception details at that point. And I said, well, he better do that and then get out. So the ceremony finishes. They are still there during the reception, and they have their computers open. And I, again, say, what's going on? And, oh, they're just waiting to get paid. They're waiting for the planner to pay them. And they're on their laptops, right? And I'm thinking, what are they doing? Like, why are they here? This is so inappropriate. And I don't want to make a fuss with the couple, but the couple had not hired them. It was just the planner. So we get back, the wedding's done. I just sort of forget the whole thing. And I have this beautiful photo. It's actually on my website of the two of them with these it looks like this like gold twinkly bokeh all around them. And it's this beautiful photo. And I'm thinking, I'm going to post this in a photography group to share. And I decided to pick one that I hadn't posted in a very long time. And it was, as I post the photo, and I'm so proud of it. And I'm scrolling down, just looking at other photographers' photos, as we all do as wedding photographers. And I'm like, oh, I think that's the same hacienda that's my couple. That's the wedding.
No.
And I keep scrolling to find like 3 more photos that he had shared at the reception on the wedding day.
So this guy's in the same groups.
So, and then I click on his profile and I see that we're Facebook friends. I didn't know him, but we were friends on Facebook. And then I see that he posted a photo on Instagram, and he had posted a photo in like another wedding platform. I think it's called like My Wed or something like that. And he's a fearless photographer. He teaches workshops. He's part of ISPWP, all these like photography associations. So this wasn't someone new.
That's next level, dude. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. This isn't someone who just was like, oh, I'm starting a wedding business in Guadalajara. And yeah, I mean, the thing that made me so mad was that one of the photos he posted was literally, I didn't even know he was shooting. It was one of the portraits that I had set up of the couple, and he was in the background, right? And like taking it over my shoulder. Probably like 5 or 6 feet behind me from a different angle. It felt very violating.
Did you reach out afterwards, or?
Oh, I messaged him immediately and was like, this is not okay.
Yeah.
Like, these are not detail photos. And he's like, well, like there was some plants in I'm like, no, that is still not a detail. Like, you cannot argue this. Like, don't play dumb at this point. And the hard thing is like, I get that he was a local, and that I'm sure, you know, during lockdown, he probably hasn't photographed a lot. And here was this beautiful wedding. And if he had found out, you know, from the planner who the photographer was, and reached out to me and said, hey, like, here I am, here's my work. I would love to second shoot for you.
Yeah.
I would have said, yes, of course. Like, that sounds great. Let's do it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have a second shooter for the day. You live local. Great. Like, let's coordinate. And but he didn't even come talk to me on the day. Like, at no point did he try and introduce himself.
That's really bad etiquette. I mean, for those that are listening, if you are a photographer or just for anybody that wants to understand etiquette in these kind of situations, when you're the contracted photographer by the clients, you are the only person that has the client's permission to be taking photographs, the model release for these clients. So among photographers, it's a huge misstep and violation in etiquette to go into somebody else's wedding, to take photographs without speaking to the photographer, no matter who you're contracted by. So I remember in one case, I was actually contracted by a coordinator to go in and do the same thing. This was early in my career. And I asked, do you have permission from the photographers? Do they know that I'm going to be there? And she said, no, but it shouldn't matter. The first thing that I did when I showed up was said, look, I'm just here to do the details. If you guys don't mind, I'll grab a couple shots of the ceremony from behind you guys. Is that okay with you? Before anything went down,
Communication.
you communicate that, and then you do not go and post those photographs and misrepresent the fact that you weren't the photographer, because that's what people are trying to do. They're trying to shortcut it and be like, hey, if I can post my images and tag that location and tag the clients and do all this kind of stuff, then I can get the marketing, buzz and feedback from this wedding, even though it wasn't mine. Such a huge no-no. Like I'm trying to think of a different way of putting that. It's almost like walking into some other chef's kitchen when they've laid out everything that needs to be done to put together this dish, and then
Written down the recipe.
yeah, they've written down the recipe, and then you kind of take it and go publish it on your own and say, I did this recipe. This is mine.
Yeah.
So that's wild. Now, the result after you reached out to him was what?
Initially, he was trying to sort of play dumb and defend. I don't think that he knew that I saw all the places that he had that he had. Initially, I think when I reached out to him, he didn't know that I had seen the photos in the photography group, just the one he posted on Instagram. And the one he posted on Instagram was just a details photo of the reception, which is still not cool.
Yeah.
But so he was trying to defend, like, look, I just did my job. I only photographed details. And that was when I started sending him screenshots from the Facebook group and said, these are not detail shots. Like, you poached my setups, like literally like my posing, everything. And I think once he sort of realized he had no
legs to stand on.
Yeah.
That's obnoxious.
He then even offered me some of the raw files of the moment before she walked down the aisle with her dad. So he sent me unwelcomingly 13 or 14 raw files to be like, but here, take these.
Wow. So I've had, along these lines, I've had second shooters and third shooters, namely earlier in our career before we were very strict and very open and had people sign. Like, we developed these contracts for our shooters specifically because of these people. But I've had second shooters come onto the job and give coordinators their business card. I'm paying the second shooter. In one case, I walked up as the second shooter's handing his business card to the coordinator and goes, so I'm working with Pi today, but I actually have my own company. Mm-hmm. Can we work together? And I was like, dude, we walked away from that. I'm like, do you not realize how effed up that was and how big of a conflict of interest that was? For you to come onto my job while being paid and to be marketing your business on my gig.
Second shooters shouldn't even know your couple's names. Like, I don't even love it when my second shooters follow, like, I see that they follow them on social media and things like that.
Really?
Because to me, it's like, if I'm working for someone else, I am your company that day. Like, I am your brand. There is no other brand. And at the end of the day, I hand you the cards. I shouldn't even, like, next week I should be like, what was the name of that couple that we shot together? I don't even remember, right? Yeah. I shouldn't be invested in their lives and their future, right? I don't want them
I agree that it should be, it needs to be an arm's length relationship. On the day of, like we expect our people on the day of to be close to our clients. But after it's all said and done, if you're being paid by a company, you are representing that company.
Right. Yeah. And if I'm second shooting and you're like, do you shoot on your own? Well, yeah, but today I am Lynn Jersa, right?
Yeah, it's a weird thing because you don't see it. I don't know that I see this in other industries. Like when I was in accounting at Ernst & Young, you don't walk into a client's office and be like, hey, right now I'm working for Ernst & Young, but on the side, this is what I do.
Right.
Why don't we work together on the side?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, you can go and get your nails done. I'm sure, you get your nails done all the time, but it's the same thing. I mean, they could be like, hey, like I'm working for this brand, but let me come to your house and, do your nails on the side.
Yeah. Shady stuff. What else you got? How about Interesting client experiences. Have you ever had a couple break up on the day of the wedding?
I had one wedding where I didn't think that the wedding was going to go through. They fought during the first look. I mean, she was running late, as all brides are. And we were at the Four Seasons in Westlake. You know how there's that beautiful architectural structure.
Yep.
And so he must have been waiting there for too long in the shade. And when he turned around, instead of, having that reaction and, he just started kind of laying into her, and they were bickering and fighting.
So
and
they're supposed to see each other for the first time. Photographers and everybody are set up to get this first look moment. He turns around and just starts fighting with her.
He turns around and starts fighting with her, and they're bickering, and you can tell she's trying not to cry. And then they were walking back, and at that point we're like, okay, we're gonna stop shooting, because obviously they don't want photos of the two of them arguing. And I look to the bride and I say, okay, we're gonna meet you guys, because now we're all just supposed to go over to the venue, because they weren't getting married at the Four Seasons. There was a different venue. And we get there, and we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting. And the planner comes up to me and says, she didn't seem like she was doing well. She looked like she had been maybe crying. This was even earlier in the day. And then she said, I think she might have an eating disorder. And I look at her and I'm like, no. I think they were just fighting, because she thinks that she didn't come because she was like sick and not well.
Oh, man.
And I said, no, I think you've completely misread the situation. But this is how rumors start,
Yeah, seriously.
And she, the bride came, the wedding happened, but I don't know if they're still together. I try not to think about that
After the fact?
if they stay together or not. I know that I had a friend of my mom's get married that I photographed in Utah.
Yeah.
And they didn't even get to the point where they had made their album.
See, for me, it's fascinating, because I mean, maybe it's because it's kind of student psychology and writing this book, but it's fascinating why they don't make it, and what are the early signs of, like, this is not a healthy relationship versus what is. But to start your wedding off, so I remember this. I remember on my wedding, the wedding night, we're at the reception, and I had a friend of mine. She was in a bad way. Like, she went outside, she was crying, apparently because, like, some of our mutual friends were gossiping about her and someone else and whatnot. This girl was like a sister to me. So I go out during the reception and I console her for 10, 15 minutes, and then I'm back inside. And I guess during that 10, 15 minutes, my ex-wife at the time was alone. Now, right thing to do? Probably not. In hindsight, don't leave the wife in the reception alone for 15 minutes. But I never stopped hearing about it for the entire duration of our marriage. It was like, probably anytime there was a point of anger, an issue, it came up repeatedly, as on the night of, to the point where the day that I said I wanted a divorce, because what ended up happening was this girl who was like my sister, she and her husband died in a car accident later. My ex still used it as an argument, and I kept begging, like, I understand that offended you on the night of. I understand. I get it. I get it. And it was still a point that was brought up repeatedly over and over. And I go, they're not even around anymore. Can you not use that against me in argument? Like, it's very painful. And 15 years later, there was a point where we get into a fight again, and then she goes back to that night again on the first night of. And it was done for me. It was over. She said the words, and I go, I'm done. Like, I'm done. I want a divorce. I'm done. That goes to say that I understand how long those kind of moments last in someone's mind. So to start your marriage off with one of those moments where at the first look, he just starts yelling, that's going to be in her mind forever. Now, she can choose to forgive for it. She can choose to do whatever, but it's still going to be there. The memory is still there, regardless of what happens afterwards. It's a difficult thing. And so along your story, I had one where I showed up for bridal prep, and I'm kind of my normal, goofy, awkward self. And that's kind of how I break the ice. So I'm making kind of jokes and whatnot, and nobody's laughing. And I know I'm not like, comedian, just standing up and doing stand-up comedy or whatever. But at the same time, like, to get no response whatsoever is weird. So the bride goes to the bathroom, and I walk over to kind of just ask when she comes out of the bathroom. Right? And so when she comes out, we're away from, everybody else. And I go, hey, did I say something that like offended anybody? Like, is everyone okay? And immediately I just start seeing her. She's like breaking down. And I'm like, no, don't cry. Don't cry. It's okay. I'm so sorry. And she's like, no, it's not you. Last night at the rehearsal dinner, my husband-to-be and I got into a huge fight in front of everybody. He slammed his phone down on the ground, stomped on it, broke it, and then stormed out. And I haven't seen him or talked to him since. And she's like, I don't know if he's going to show up today. So everybody knows that this is going on because it was right in front of everybody. And I'm like, okay, I guess we just kind of keep going like business as usual. So we continue through the afternoon, and we show up to the ceremony site, to the church. And I ask my second shooter, I go, what shots of him did you guys get so far? Like, what do we need to continue doing? And he's like, none. I go, no, I'm sure you got some good stuff. What do you got? Like, show me your camera. He's like, no, I have no photos. Huh? And I go, just show me your camera. And he pulls it up. There's not a single photograph on the camera. I'm like, what is happening? He goes, he told me not to shoot at all, multiple times. I haven't been able to get a single photograph of anything. And I've been only told to like wait outside this entire time. So I go over to the groom at this point. I introduce myself. We go to a private spot, and I go, look, you got to pull your head out of your ass, dude. And I actually relayed this story to him of this issue that was still ongoing in my own life from the wedding day. And I go, this is going to be a day that you remember forever. And it's going to be brought up multiple times. Like just telling him like, this is my own experience. Please learn from me. And he's like, I can't do it, man. I just can't do it. I'm like, can't do what? You can't walk down the aisle. You can't, like, this isn't someone if you don't want to marry this person, don't. Like, be done. Like, that's it. He's like, just can't do it. And I go, why don't you take a minute? Let's go start getting some photographs of you and your friends. He takes a minute, and then he's like, nope, I don't want to do it. So we're all waiting for the ceremony to happen. He shows up. Okay, they go down the aisle. The entire time during the ceremony, the priest or whatever, he's going through his whole thing, and he's just got this scowl on his face. Like you have to intentionally make that face. A resting face does not look like, I can't make that face. Right. So he's just got this intentional scowl throughout the entire ceremony. So what am I doing? I'm like documenting from like weird angles, like shooting her expression.
Like, to get his face. Yeah.
I'm like, let's frame him out. Let's use something to block him in the frame. Let's do every possible trick. And then I notice her dad is like crying, and I'm like, oh, gorgeous. I can run up to the front, and I'm like shooting her dad crying. And then 5 shots into it, I notice mom's like consoling him, and dad's like ugly crying because his daughter's marrying this person. I'm like, okay, stop shooting that. So the words come, do you take this woman to be your wife? And there's what felt like a 60-second pause where it's just silence. And then you hear, fine. I shit you not, Marlies. Fine. Ceremony ends. I get everybody on the stage, and I'm like, let's be happy. Like, come on, guys. And in my head, I'm like, what effed up life decisions have brought me to this moment where I have to be doing this right now. But like a clown, I'm just performing, getting them up on the stage. And they get up on the stage. First shot. Click. Beautiful, guys. Let's do this. I can't do it, Pi. The groom walks out. Just in front of everybody, just walks out. Bride is now inconsolable. Everyone's crying. And I'm like, cool. Let's just leave space in the photographs. We'll Photoshop them in. And they're like, nope, stop everything. Stop, just stop. And they all go, do their own thing. And so we just sat there like awkwardly for the next few hours. To conclude the story, he does show up at the reception 3 hours later, pissed drunk. And they then proceed to go from table to table, apologizing, and like she's going off like, I had to get him drunk to marry me. Ha ha ha. This is a funny joke. And she says it to every single table. Anyway, I found out that this is their relationship, and it's hyper toxic, and everybody around them knows it.
And they're still married.
I don't know. When I left that, so I didn't want to talk too long on this one story, but I left that day going, I never want to do that ever again. That was the worst day of my career. They called me a day later, and they go, hey, we didn't get any couples photographs on the day of the wedding. And I go, I know. You guys broke up on the day of the wedding. And they're like, yeah, we know. But can we hire you to come out Monday? So Saturday, Sunday, they call me Monday. Can we hire you to come out Monday before we leave so we can do some couples photos? And like, I just made this up. Guys, I have a workshop on Monday with students already. I would have to charge like $4,000 just to make up the money that I'm going to lose from the workshop. They go, fine. And I was like, damn it.
Yeah.
So they hire me out to go back on Monday. They get into a fight before the shoot starts on Monday. And I literally pulled them to the side. As soon as I got there, they arrive. They're already fighting. And I go, I'm not going to do this right now. I'm going to take your $4,000 and I'm going to walk away. If you guys aren't going to, if you can't get your shit together for the next few hours, we're done. I'm taking your money and I'm leaving. Like, I'm not going to take these pictures. And I go, why don't you take the time that you need? You need 15 minutes, sit down and figure it out. And when you're in a good space, let's go out and take some pictures. So they did. They sat down, they figured it out. And then we had a good, rest of our little shoot.
I had a shoot similar where the couple, when I got there, was arguing. And they wanted sort of like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Angelina Jolie, Brad Pitt type shoot.
Yeah.
And so we were at Pally House, which is this boutique hotel in Santa Monica. And I said, I told them, bring some wine or whatever. So I'm like, we're going to open the wine. So we open the wine, we sit down. I said, look, I can start, we have 2.5 hours. It was a longer shoot. I said, I can start shooting you right now.
Yeah.
I said, but it's not going to work. I said, I'm putting my camera down, and the three of us and my assistant, we're all just going to sit down and we're just going to chat. Let's just talk. Let's just hang out. And I sort of gave them that same that same boundary of, I'm not going to just shoot you because you're paying me and I can take photos that are not going to work for anyone. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is even when we started, there was still a little bit of that like tension. And I was like, guys, let's use it. Right. Mm-hmm. Like there's a fine line between love and hate. And I said, it's obvious that you guys are just having an off day, right? For whatever reason, you're stressed. And I know shoots are stressful. Being a client, you have to get your hair done and you have to get your clothes together and, you're coordinating with another person. You have to drive and all these things. And so I knew it wasn't their fundamental relationship. I knew it was just, they were just in a bad place. Yeah. And it's actually one of the featured shoots on my website. Their names are Nisha and Avi. And you can see in the progression of the shoot, them go from this sort of like feigned indifference and sort of this tension to like a little bit of like sexy passion. And then, and we kind of just
totally used it.
We used it. We ended up using it. And the shoot ended up being that much more interesting to the point that I actually just did an engagement shoot 2 days ago, and they hired me because they saw that shoot on my website and they were like, we want that.
That's super cool.
Yeah. And I was like, well,
Yeah. We
Here's
had
why that
motivation.
worked. Yeah. I was like, maybe you guys should just, have that that moment of, I always tell so I come from this theater background, and there's this moment when two actors are in a scene and they get really close, right? And they're and our acting coaches would always tell us when I was in college, if you get that close to someone in a scene, you have to fight or fuck. Like those are and I don't usually use those words, but
We've already done it on the podcast. So this episode is going to get the explicit marking.
So it's true. I mean, so you get two people and there's that fine line. Are they going to fight? Or are they going to do it? Are they going to go in for it? And
I've never heard that saying before, but it makes sense.
it totally does. Like, cause if you see two actors and they're just shouting in each other, they're shouting in each other's faces, you've got to eat, like, some physical contact is next, right? Yeah. Otherwise it just doesn't work for the scene. And it's the same thing. I think in a lot of ways I've used my theater training and background and scene study and all those things and sort of put them into this creative platform of photography. And if you're gonna get two people that close, and have that much fire, they have to be ready for one or the other.
Yeah.
So
I like it. That's a great way of using that mode, especially if they want the Mr. and Mrs. Smith vibe, because that's very much that kind of like serious, angry, but passion kind of vibe. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's cool.
Doesn't work for everybody. You'll have some couples that will want that, and it's like, it just doesn't work for you guys.
Yeah.
It's just not your relationship, right?
Yeah.
And it's just understanding couples and being able to very quickly sort of read their dynamic, their connection. And you've seen it. I mean, there's some couples that you can barely get them to hold hands, right?
Yeah.
And they don't even have a first kiss. I've had, from various cultures, I've had couples not do a first kiss. But then you have other couples that you're like, are they still doing their first kiss? Like they're spending more than a little bit more. Yeah, that like 10 minutes of alone time that they need, they're really using it. Like, so.
What's been a very interesting thing for me is over the past few years, as I've been laying out the foundation of this book and kind of figuring out like what are the different pieces, and I was taking all the data from the case studies and everything I know, and I came up with this framework. I call it this stupid simple relationship method. And in this method, there's basically 10 pieces that kind of lay out a healthy relationship. What's been crazy for me, excuse me, is going into shoots now, and it's almost like watching train wrecks in slow motion. For years, I can see things that are like very visible now. Signs of this is not healthy and it's not going where it should. And in every case, it's been proven like accurate. But it's weird to still see it and then to continue documenting it when there's super visible signs that it's something that's not healthy. I don't know how to connect those two, or like how to kind of resolve them. But like, for example, one of the key things that I talk about in the book is maintaining desire, your attraction for somebody. And a crucial part of that is what I call regard. And rather than simplifying regard down to like just physical attraction, regard actually talks about what attraction is, from the sense of it's a combination of, respect, admiration, as well as it can be attraction. And it applies to both platonic and romantic relationships. But the best way I could use to say why is respect and those pieces important to attraction is, I'm sure you can think of people that are beautiful, but that repulse you. Based on just, you don't have respect for them, they don't have the same values, that they're just not. Can you think of people like that?
Of course.
Okay.
Every mean girl from every high school, I think.
Yeah. So like there are plenty of people that are physically attractive, but that they repulse us, right? And so that's the easiest way to kind of show, respect has to be tied to attraction. Otherwise, so that's why I came up with the term regard. Anyway, while on shoots, I'll often hear things being said, sometimes in a joking manner, that very much shows the lack of respect for the other person, the lack of admiration. Quite a few times I've heard guys joke about like, yeah, that's just what she does. She just spends money and goes and hangs out with her OC friends. as a joke, but you know it's not a joke. You know there's truth to what.
OC friends.
Yeah. I've heard like, I had one guy that was an eye doctor that said the words. I go, so what do you do, to his fiance? And he responds, she's just a housewife. Now, whether you're joking or not, you say those words with just a housewife. That implies your perception of a person. And so there'll be certain remarks made early on, and it's tough to like bury those and be like, I'm just going to take these photographs, even though I know where this is going. I don't know what to do with that.
Well, you can't. You're put in a tough spot, because once you become aware and you can see those things, you still aren't in a place where you can.
No, it's not your place to do or say anything.
Right.
Yeah. And that type of advice is a difficult thing, even when people are asking for it.
Well, and that's the other side of it, right? The other component is that you can't ever help anyone unless if they're in a place where they're wanting to change. I mean, change is so hard, even if you do want to change, right?
Yeah.
Now imagine unsolicited advice to make you change.
No, like I just keep my mouth shut and I just do my job. But that's what on some shoots, like now I find that I get very into the documenting process and very into the job when my clients have something genuine, when it's visible and it's genuine. I feel like I'm there with them. When it's not, and I can sense it, I'm doing my job. But there's a clear differentiator now.
Right. Well, and again, I mean, going back to being in a place of privilege, we are lucky that we get those opportunities that aren't just doing a job.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So, any other stories for me? What else you got? Do you have stories of those? Like, do you have those kind of moments where you see those kind of signs as you're out?
I was going to think of like a positive story.
Give me a
trying
positive
to think
one.
if there's any. I feel like we've been just tearing it all down.
It's been a lot of tea.
All the tea. Oh my gosh, you sound like such a TikToker.
I've learned all sorts of
I
words
know.
on
I was
TikTok.
going to say. It's okay. Anytime I flip my phone upside down now and shoot super wide, I think of you.
This is what everyone is teasing about, that like flip your phone upside down. That's how you got to take a picture.
Make the legs look really long. A positive story. I mean, I had one couple. He actually I'm shooting a wedding in May in Kauai, and he was just in a near fatal motorcycle accident.
Oh, that's crazy.
And I actually lost my sister in a motorcycle, my oldest sister, to a motorcycle accident. And so when thank you, I was 10. I was very young at the time, but it's long story short, it's why we ended up moving to Utah, which makes no sense. But I was very hesitant to share on my website sort of that story. So my oldest sister, the one who passed, was she was in love with photography. Mm-hmm. And she, when I was 10, took my photograph. And I was a very awkward child who was very proud of the fact that I always felt that I was intelligent, and that I was a musician. I was a classical pianist as a young child, and like competitive. And so I always sort of relied on my talent or my skill and my good grades kind of thing. But I never felt beautiful, right? Mm-hmm. It was just something that, especially because I had these two older sisters who were, in my eyes, just so beautiful. And she one day took me outside with her film camera and gave me her jean jacket and her hat and her scarf, and took these black and white photos of me. And for the first time, it was like I saw myself as beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm sure it was weeks later when she developed the film back in those days. But those pictures were everything to me. And when I think about what photographs mean, it's the fact that I can give that to other people and give them that sort of pass on that gift of making them feel something. It's very much tied to my why, right?
Yeah.
And but because it sort of has this heavy overtone, I didn't know whether or not to share it sort of in a more public place on my website. And when this bride reached out to me and said, I read your story,
Yeah.
and my fiance almost died in a motorcycle accident, and the fact that you shared that, you know, it just drew me even further to your work because, you know, this, that, and the other thing. So, I'm very much, they have hired me to just spend a day adventuring around Kauai. They'll be getting married in the morning, and then
That's amazing.
Yeah. And we're going to just be going around the island and taking photos of them. But I've only met with them online, and then we've spoken on the phone because I'm also helping them sort of plan this whole thing. But when you see a couple that has gone through, you know, almost losing one or the other, they make it through to the other side, because there are traumatic experiences that couples have and they don't make it out, right? Like they won't make it through. You can feel that their connection is even stronger as a result.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. I had one other couple that he had open heart surgery. And they were going to have a big wedding, and then said, you know, he has this heart condition where you have to have this surgery for him. And he survived the surgery. And then they had this really small, this is before micro weddings were a thing, these small weddings. So they probably had like 15, 20 people. And, you know, he said in his vows, like, you loved me even with a broken heart. And you just can see there's that kind of a love. There's so many different levels of love, and the surface level is the one I am like absolutely the least interested in.
Yeah.
It's those deeper levels that are really fascinating, in my opinion.
I find that when I find clients that have similar values to myself, I can't think of a better job than documenting and capturing what it is that they value, and it's the same thing that I appreciate. I had an older client, an older couple this was for both of them. I think for him it was his second marriage. For her, she'd never been married, and they're in their 40s. But I remember them relaying their story of, like, for her, what it was to not have found the right one and turning down the ones that were not. And then for him, what it was to be in his marriage, and then to have left it, and then to have found what they both value and the relationship that they've created. And on the day on their engagement shoot, every time I was with them, all I could think about was just documenting every detail. I was like, every nuance, and I want to be able to have them look back and to be able to see the love that I can clearly see in them, and what they, you know, the way that they see each other. But I want them to see it through my eyes. And it was a very interesting connection, because I've realized that when clients have a very similar why, there's not a better job, in my opinion. A lot of times when they don't have my why, then I just do my job. But
That's what we do, right? Sometimes we just work for that paycheck. Yeah.
But I appreciate you being here, my friend. I feel like we need to bring you back at some point and do a part 2, more stories with Marlies.
Well, let me ask you, can I ask you one last question?
Yeah.
Do we have time?
Yeah.
What do you, and I guess I'm just curious, having been married, been in a difficult marriage, gotten through, and now in a healthy relationship with someone, and having this family and all these things, do you believe that long-term happy relationships are possible?
Yes. 1,000%. When there's
and I say happy, I should say happy and healthy.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think that is completely doable. I think it begins with understanding what a healthy relationship looks like and starting with two people that are, I mean, you either have to come to the table with similar values or you have to come to the table agreeing to work to get to those similar values, you know. But the problem is that I wrote this book because I have a line in there that talks about, you know, statistically, the vast majority of us are going to enter adulthood. If relationships are a marathon, we're going to enter adulthood never learning how to walk. Like, we're not even going to know the basics of it. Why? Because 40 to 70% of people, marriages end in divorce. And of the ones, and this just depends on where you live and what demographic and all that junk. But of the ones that stay together, how many are healthy? So this isn't to say like, you know, marriage is the only thing. It's to say that for the vast majority of us, the very first example of a relationship is not a healthy one. Then you go and you have your friendships and you have your, you know, girlfriend, your boyfriends, your all of these other relationships, and every time one of them goes wrong, we lean back on these weird dysfunctional explanations, oversimplified cliches, you know, oh, you didn't put enough time into it, or, you know, long distance never works, or, you know, oh, you can't go to bed angry, and friendship is all about loyalty, when all of it is complete horseshit. You know, not in the sense of like none of those things are true, in the sense of they're generalizations and oversimplifications that don't mean anything. Like, friendships can't be only about loyalty. Maybe that's a piece of it, right? But you can't say that just because you're loyal to me, Marlies, that is what keeps our friendship healthy. No, what keeps the friendship healthy is two people being on, like, if I were to say ours, right? It'd be intellectually being on a similar wavelength, being able to understand your values and you understand mine. There's relatability in everything that we talk about. There's common interests. There's a whole list of things. And loyalty is just one kind of byproduct of it. But we rely on these cliches. And if you go to a wedding, you hear them all the time. I mean, every time someone gives a toast, it's nothing but cliches. And that's become very annoying for me to hear. Like, never go to bed angry, dude. Come on. In a lifetime, how is that a reasonable expectation? What if I told you I met a couple who thought they were going to get divorced because one time they went to bed angry? That's how much she believed in that. Like, that cliche at that point becomes damaging. It's not helpful.
Sometimes you just need a good night's sleep and then you're not angry anymore.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to wake up early for work. What are you going to do? You're going to battle it out? When you're angry, tired, lonely, hungry, those are not good times to try and resolve conflict.
Anything.
Yeah. So anyway, that was to get to a place where you have a healthy long-term relationship. You need to know what it looks like. For some people, they just intrinsically know, but that's such a small piece of like the overall picture. Statistically, the number of people that just inherently understand this is what, 10%, 20%? Everybody else is kind of working off of these dysfunctional oversimplifications.
But do you think the people that do understand it because they've put in the work to learn about it, or it's because they're the rare ones who have had it modeled for them?
I think they've had it modeled. So I gave one example in the book of a couple that I know that's been married 60 years. They're amazing. Model couple. You would expect that their children would be similar examples, right? Their children had their parents' example. And granted, they still have their share of issues, but they've worked through everything. They've come closer through each thing, right? Well, of their 5 children, 4 of them divorced. 1 of them chose to never get married. 3 of them divorced. 1 is unhappily married. 1 chose to never get married. Sorry. So how is that like possible? Mom and dad, just because they have a good relationship, just because they understand it, you know, intuitively, doesn't mean that they know how to explain it. To one of their kids, they said, you know, to all their kids, they said, marry within your religion. You know, this is how you should create friendships, and you should marry within the religion. This is how you create relationships with people who have similar values. Problem is, in a church with 100 people, the only guarantee I could give you is that you are more likely to be different than the person sitting next to you than you are to be similar. Everyone has a different reason for going to church. Some do it for their parents. Some do it out of obligation. Some do it because other people do it, because their friends do it. A very select and few number are doing it for spiritual edification. For some, it's their social network. It's not to say that any of those reasons are wrong, but your values aren't so much your religion or that you go to church. It's the reason why you are doing those things. So one of their kids dates somebody in high school, and she breaks his heart. She says, I don't want to, get this serious. Well, he comes home brokenhearted, and mom and dad reiterate, this is why we tell you to date and befriend people within our religion, because she's of some other religion. So he follows that, and he goes and he marries a woman that's of his religion. She cheats on him. Like those rules and those generalizations don't help us. They don't help us to figure out what's going on. So even what I found is that even people that model the example generally can't explain it in a way that makes sense to others. And that's what the book is aimed to do, is like, here's the 10 simple pieces. This is what to look out for. These are the areas to do this. But yes, 100% possible to have healthy long-term relationships. Is that an answer?
Yeah. No, it's good. I could keep asking you questions, but I know that that's not what we're here for.
No, we need to do a part 2 and keep our conversation going. So today we're a little bit short because I do have one more guest in a little bit. But if when you're down, let's do a part 2.
Would love to chat with you anytime.
Okay.
And to have Anthony on Google standby.
Well,
Pisces.
Yes. Now the podcast world knows my nickname, and
I thought it was Pylon Musk. I thought that's what we called you.
Elon Musk. Oh, if only all of us could be more like Elon. Thank you so much for coming here, my friend. I am so grateful you are in this industry, this space. The photographic world is lucky to have you, and I mean that.
Thank you.
Genuinely.
Thank you.
You are an inspiration to all of us, and the images you create are ridiculous. So much for not being able to make a career out of a hobby.
Yeah.
Prove that one wrong.
Stuck it to him.
All right. So everybody that's listening, please be sure to check out Marlies' work. We are going to link up her website to the show notes, or you can simply go to mhartphoto.com. Any other way that they should be able to keep in touch with you? Maybe Instagram?
Instagram, mhartphoto.
mhartphoto.
Mm-hmm.
All right, buddy. Until episode 2, part 2.
Thank you, friendo.
Okay. See ya.